Usually when you think about ancient letters, there is this expectation of them being, dusty, polite, maybe just a little irrelevant.
Right, like a historical artifact sitting safely behind glass in a museum somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Carefully contained and, well, completely harmless. But today, we are looking at a first-century document that just shatters that glass. It is quite literally explosive.
Oh, definitely. It's anything but harmless.
So welcome to the deep dive. And before we really get started today, we want to warmly welcome you and offer a divine blessing for your day and for your entire week ahead. May it be full of light and purpose for you.
Yeah, it is so important to set that intention, especially considering, the sheer weight of what we are unpacking today. We are looking at the first chapter of Paul's letter to the Romans, specifically verses 1 through 32.
Right, and the fascinating thing about this text is that historically it hasn't functioned just as a standard piece of ancient mail.
No, not at all. The commentaries we're pulling from today frame this as a theological masterpiece. I mean, this is the exact text that provided the spark for the 16th century Reformation.
Wow.
Yeah, and it has ignited countless spiritual revivals since then. It is the absolute definition of paradigm shifting.
So our mission for this deep dive is to extract the core insights from the theological study of this chapter. We are going to explore the highly unusual posture of the messenger, the paradoxical world-shaking power of the message itself, and finally, a truly surprising, almost chilling definition of divine wrath.
Which is quite a list.
It really is, but you can't really understand the monumental nature of this message without first understanding the man delivering it, right? And, how he views the people he's actually writing to.
Right, because right in the opening lines, Paul introduces himself using two highly contrasting titles. It is a dual identity that totally sets the tone for everything that follows in the letter.
Okay, let's unpack this, because he calls himself a servant and an apostle, yeah?
Yes. In the original Greek, he uses the word doulos, which translates to servant or slave, and then apostolo, meaning apostle.
And in the modern world, when you hear the word servant, you probably think of, like, a butler or maybe a public servant, like a politician, or, someone helping out at a charity.
Yeah, but the historical context here is so much more intense than that. It is entirely different.
How so?
Well, in the first century Roman Empire, a doulos was not a willing volunteer. This was a slave, someone bought with a price. To put it in perspective, there were an estimated 60 million slaves in the empire at that time.
60 million? That's incredible.
It was massive. So it wasn't a metaphor for them. It was an everyday reality. A slave was considered mere property, basically a living tool.
And the sources point out a really brutal detail about that era, right? About how they were marked?
Yes. Slaves often wore a heavy iron collar, literally welded permanently around their necks, bearing their master's name. They had no autonomy, no will of their own, no personal rights.
Wow. So when Paul uses this word, he is claiming a level of total, complete submission to Christ. He is essentially saying, I wear the iron collar of Jesus. I have no personal agenda.
Exactly. But the tension here is that he immediately pairs that absolute lowliness with the word apostle.
Which is an incredibly high title.
Oh, absolutely. It means a directly commissioned envoy of the king. It's the ultimate paradox of humility and authority.
That makes me think of a modern-day ambassador. Technically, an ambassador is a public servant entirely bound to the will of their leader back home.
Right. They can't just invent their own foreign policy.
Exactly. But when that ambassador steps into a foreign land, they wield immense, unquestionable authority because they speak directly on behalf of the head of state.
That tension is exactly how he views his calling. The servant title expresses profound humility. He is nothing on his own. But the apostle title emphasizes absolute authority.
So he didn't invent the message.
No, he is simply the authorized channel for it. And this dual identity profoundly shapes how he views the church in Rome, too. He addresses the recipients as being called to be saints.
Which, if you grew up around certain religious traditions, you hear saint and immediately picture, like, a perfect statue with a halo.
Right, or someone who performed 3 miracles and got canonized by an institution centuries after they died.
Yeah, exactly.
But the text reclaims the original meaning of that word. Being a saint, in this context, involves 2 distinct states. First, there's a positional state.
Meaning they are completely separated from the world and belong to God.
Yes, it's like being drafted into an elite team. The moment you are drafted, your position changes. You are officially on the roster. But second, there's a processual state.
Meaning now you actually have to show up to practice every day and do the grueling work.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It is the active, daily living out of that calling, purifying themselves in their everyday lives. It is a massive gift to be drafted, but it's also a rigorous demand to play the game.
And he greets these saints with the phrase, grace and peace. Honestly, that is one of those phrases you hear so much in religious circles that it can start to sound like the ancient equivalent of best wishes or kind regards.
Yeah, it definitely loses its punch for modern ears.
It really does.
But the chronological order of those two words is the foundation of the entire theology of this text. Grace is the root, and peace is the fruit.
The root and the fruit, I like that.
Right, so grace is the unmerited, completely free love of God. It is the singular cause of salvation. Peace, on the other hand, is the resulting state.
The condition of being totally reconciled with
Yep,
God.
exactly, experiencing a cessation of hostilities. You absolutely cannot have the fruit of peace without first receiving the root of grace.
So understanding that unmerited grace and wearing that metaphorical iron collar of submission, that perfectly explains why Paul feels such an intense, almost frantic obligation to share his message.
Yeah, he actually calls himself a debtor to the Greeks and the barbarians. He says he owes them this message.
And the concept of debt here is really fascinating. Usually when you think of debt, you imagine borrowing money from a bank and owing them repayment.
Right, paying off a loan.
But this is a very different kind of debt. Think of it as the debt of holding a priceless treasure that was entrusted to you, but is explicitly meant to be delivered to a third party.
It's like if someone handed me $1 million and said, go give this to your listener across town. I don't own that money.
Right. You are now in debt to the listener until you deliver it.
And if you don't deliver it, you aren't just being lazy. You are committing embezzlement.
Embezzlement. That's a heavy word for it.
But it's true. You are hoarding something that rightfully belongs to someone else. Paul feels this crushing, sacred duty to deliver the treasure of the gospel. He sees holding onto it as a crime.
And he isn't timid about what this treasure is either. He calls the gospel the power of God for salvation.
Yeah, and the Greek word used for power there is dynamis.
Which, when you trace the etymology, is literally where we get the word dynamite.
It is an irresistible, explosive power. It's a power that shatters granite walls. The historical context shows this message crossing all cultural and social barriers.
It went everywhere.
It did. It entered the heavily guarded palace of Nero, it conquered the hearts of rough Roman guards, and it penetrated the most elite intellectual fortresses of the ancient world. It doesn't just improve people's manners, it spiritually resurrects them.
But what I found really compelling in our sources is how much time they spend defining what this dynamite message is not. Because, there are popular counterfeits today that look like the gospel, but completely lack that explosive power.
Yeah, and exploring those counterfeits really clarifies the true message. The first counterfeit is what is often called the prosperity gospel.
That's right.
This is incredibly appealing to human nature because it puts man at the absolute center of the universe. It essentially treats God as a cosmic servant or a genie in a bottle.
Like, his primary job is to provide earthly success, physical comfort, and literal mansions on earth.
Exactly. It's totally anthropocentric, man-centered, rather than theocentric or God-centered.
You are basically using God to get the world, rather than giving up the world to get God.
It warps the entire relationship. You are no longer the doulos, the servant wearing the collar. You are trying to make God wear the collar for you.
That is such a stark contrast.
That really is.
Oh.
And the second counterfeit is a purely miracle-centric gospel. Now, the text absolutely affirms that God performs miracles.
Right, it's not anti-miracle.
Not at all. But it points out a profound historical paradox, which is that an obsession with physical miracles doesn't actually cure the human heart.
Which seems counterintuitive, right? You would think that if people just saw undeniable proof, they would change.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But look at the generations of Moses or Elijah or the early apostles.
Oh, that's true.
Those specific generations saw the most astounding, undeniable physical miracles in history. They literally saw the Red Sea part.
Yeah, you can't get more undeniable than that.
Right. Yet those same people remained highly rebellious and unbelieving. Why? Because a miracle only proves God's power. It doesn't fundamentally change the human heart's innate desire to be its own boss.
So a miracle alters your physical circumstances, but the true gospel acts as dynamite to alter your actual nature.
Spot on.
Okay, well, I have to ask about attention here. If this true gospel is pure, irresistible dynamite power and alters our nature, and it requires absolutely nothing from us but faith, doesn't that make human effort entirely irrelevant?
It's a great question.
Like, what is the point of human faith if God's power is doing all the heavy lifting?
It's the ultimate question of justification, really. How does weak human faith interact with explosive divine power? It could definitely feel like faith is just a passive, irrelevant add-on.
Well, there were two striking analogies in the material that really made this click for me.
Oh, I know the ones you mean.
Yeah, the first one says that faith is merely the empty hand of a beggar extended to receive a gift from a king.
Yes. The hand does no actual work to earn the gold. It just assumes the posture to receive it.
Exactly. And the second analogy is even more mechanical. It describes faith as the coupling that connects the human train to God's locomotive.
Think about the physics of that train analogy. The coupling itself has absolutely 0 horsepower.
Right. None.
It cannot pull the train a single inch on its own.
It is entirely God's locomotive, God's massive engine doing all the pulling. Faith is simply the connection point. We aren't saved because of the merit of our faith, like the faith itself is the fuel. We are saved through faith.
It's just the hook, and that completely resolves the tension. God provides the righteousness, God provides the power, and humans simply receive it through the empty hand of faith.
But knowing this immense, explosive rescue mission exists forces us to ask an incredibly uncomfortable question.
Which is?
Why do we need rescuing in the first place? I mean, you don't send in dynamite unless there is an insurmountable mountain blocking the way, and the obstacle, it turns out, is us.
Yeah, this brings us to the text's analysis of human depravity. And the core argument here is that humanity's fundamental problem is not metaphysical.
So it's not just that we are ignorant.
No, it is not that we just lack proper education or that we haven't evolved enough. The root problem is a deliberate moral suppression of the truth.
It totally shatters the myth of ignorance. We love to tell ourselves, oh, people just don't know any better. If they just had more information, they would do the right thing.
But this text says no, they do know. They absolutely know.
How does it argue that, though?
The argument relies on what theologians call natural revelation. God left his fingerprints all over creation. The Greek word for the universe is cosmos, which literally means order.
Is the exact opposite of chaos.
Exactly. When you look at intelligent design, the reliable order of the seasons, the staggering complexity of biological life, it all acts as a loud, undeniable witness to a creator's eternal power and divine nature.
So nobody is living in a totally dark room. The light of revelation is shining brightly, but humanity is actively choosing to squeeze its eyes shut.
And because of that, the text declares that humans are entirely without excuse. The fundamental sin of humanity isn't just breaking a set of arbitrary rules. It is a cosmic treason.
Cosmic treason.
Yes. It is the active choice to worship and serve the created things, whether that means worshiping literal nature or money or political power or our own reflections in the mirror, rather than the creator who designed it all.
Now, when we hear about God's wrath against this kind of treason, our minds immediately go to Hollywood imagery, right?
Oh, for sure. We picture lightning bolts striking people down from the sky.
Exactly. We picture sudden earthquakes, fire, and brimstone. But the text provides a completely surprising, incredibly quiet definition of how God's wrath is actually executed in the present day.
It is a chilling definition, precisely because it is so quiet. The text states that God's wrath is expressed simply by handing people over to their own desires.
He just gives us exactly what we want. There are a couple of vivid ways to visualize this from the deep dive sources. Imagine humanity as a massive, heavy truck speeding down a steep mountain road. God, in his mercy, has his foot pressed firmly on the brake.
That is his restraining grace, keeping society from completely destroying itself.
Right. So God's wrath in this present age is simply God deciding to take his foot off the brake.
The resistance is removed.
Or there's another analogy from the philosopher Francis Schaeffer. He said humanity is like a dog desperately pulling at its leash, wanting to run away from its owner into a dangerous forest.
Right, and God's judgment isn't striking the dog with lightning.
No, his judgment is simply taking off the leash.
The implications of that are profound when you look at the world around you. The ultimate judgment isn't necessarily fire raining down from the clouds. It is the internal fire of our own unchecked runaway desires.
That is incredibly heavy.
It is. When your internal conscience stops accusing you, and when society at large begins to not just tolerate, but actively applaud extreme immorality and corruption, that isn't a sign that God is ignoring the situation, or that he doesn't care.
Wow.
That is the active judgment of God playing out in real time.
It shifts your whole perspective on what it means to be free. Because in our modern culture, getting everything we want, doing whatever we feel like doing, is the highest definition of freedom.
Totally.
But this text argues that getting exactly what our darkest impulses desire, without any moral restraint, is the literal definition of divine wrath.
It's the ultimate paradox of the entire chapter, really. True freedom is found in the iron collar in submitting to the Creator who designed you.
While the illusion of absolute autonomy, the demand to be your own God, is actually the runaway truck plunging off the cliff.
Exactly. God simply says, "Thy will be done," and lets the natural consequences of that autonomy unfold.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about your week. Building on this chilling concept of wrath as abandonment to our own desires.
It's a tough question to ask ourselves.
It really is. If God's most severe present-day judgment is simply taking his foot off the brake and giving us exactly what we want without any moral restraint, what desires or obsessions are you currently chasing in your own life?
Yeah.
What are the things you mistakenly view as your ultimate freedom, but might actually be your own runaway truck heading for the cliff? It's a question worth sitting with.
It requires some very deep, honest reflection about what we are actually asking for when we demand to have things our own way.
It really does. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the foundational theology of Romans chapter 1. We want to say goodbye by declaring that God blesses all of you, our listeners.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for diving deep with us today, and we will see you next time.